Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending April 22nd. We've got a big show this week as we've got Matt Holt, VP of Business Development for CG Technologies. He'll be stopping by and taking us behind the counter to see where the sharp money is going on this weekend's NBA playoff games. Ralph Michaels and Dave Cokin join me in studio tonight as we're going to look at some of the biggest NBA playoff games this weekend, along with some baseball action. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we will have our best bets, 4-1, and we've got a play pending. We've got a Boston Celtics series play still in action, so 4-1 with one game pending, and that'll be at the end of the show. Mark Seidel's behind the controls. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. Let's get this party started, and let's start it off with the main man at CG. It's Matt Holt. Matt, welcome back to the show. How you doing, my man?
Hey, gentlemen, what's going on?
You can follow Matt Holt at Matthew Holt VP on Twitter. I highly recommend giving him a follow as he passes along some great betting information on a daily basis. And every once in a while, you might get a picture of a giant fish that he caught with him and his son, Matty Jr., out at the lake. Some nice fishing photos we've been seeing lately there, Matt.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been a good spring out at the lake. The weather's actually been good. I mean, we're high 60s, low 70s today, so as long as the weather stays somewhat cool, I'll still be heading down to the lake fishing.
Well, I go looking for big fish, too, but the ones I look for are at the poker table on the strip. So I haven't got any big ones like you snagged on.
Which smell worse?
There have been some poker plays
I know.
that have been a little smelly. Matt, NBA playoffs are in full gear. Before we get to that, I just got to ask you real quick. We know this town's got hockey fever right now with the Vegas Golden Knights, and obviously a lot of books have said as much as we're rooting for the Vegas Knights, they've got some serious exposure at the betting windows with some future wagers. How's CG standing up if the Knights go all the way?
So the Knights right now are really the only team that we lose to in the NHL futures market, but we've actually dwindled that number quite down, and it was a scary figure for us, as it was for a lot of books. But I've talked to a few bookmakers, and over the last few weeks, they've been able to bring their number down pretty significantly as well. We've been able to bring our number down. It's still going to be an ugly red number, but it's certainly a lot more manageable than it was a few weeks ago.
Can you talk about how you did that? I mean, I know we had Jason Simmel on the radio show today, and he was talking about trying to get some action on other teams, such as the Winnipeg Jets and things like that, and that way reducing liability. Can you explain how that works?
Well, sure. So a lot of people, they misconstrue the betting markets here as like one big global betting market, and it's not really. There's an offshore betting market and there's a Las Vegas betting market, and the two are actually quite different. And what happens is essentially a lot of bettors play into both markets, and if you can be different in this market or even different than everyone else in your market, then you tend to attract action. The problem with the Nevada market here in this situation is everybody has Golden Knights liability, probably more than they wanted. So what we really needed to do was separate ourselves and attract some of those bettors that normally probably would have played offshore, that were looking at, hey, playing the Wild, playing Nashville, playing the Bruins, playing Tampa Bay, playing San Jose, and saying, okay, what is the competitive market price everywhere else? Let's beat that price, and any of those guys that were going to bet those games or bet those teams to win it all, let's give them a reason to come here and bet them, and that's basically what we've done.
Matt, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and most of the series have either played Game 3 or are playing them in the next day or two. How has the betting been so far? Has it been favorable for the house, or has it been the better so far?
Not bad, actually. This is one of the better NBA playoffs we've seen in years. I mean, let's remember last year, Cleveland was, 12-1 going to the finals, and Golden State was 12-0, or vice versa. I mean, it was an absolute steamrolling by the top teams heading into the finals there, and it's been like that for a couple of years now. So it's nice to see some parity already this year. Philadelphia lost a game at home. Cleveland lost game 1 at home. Houston only won by 3 as the number 1 seed in Game 1. Actually, these series feel a lot more competitive, and when they feel more competitive, bettors tend to gravitate towards them more, and thus NBA handle in the playoffs is significantly up.
Matt, you talked about liability and how it you compensate for that in the NHL. Is there any substantial liability on NBA series futures, and what are you doing if there is such a scenario to kind of balance that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of one on Houston, but let's face it, everyone went into this season saying that Golden State and Cleveland was a foregone conclusion. So you didn't have that massive buildup in the preseason futures market that you normally do, like we saw with the Golden Knights in hockey. The Golden Knights opened 500-1, and people bet them just because they're the new team in town. And then after they got off to that hot start, they bet them because now they're our team, right? And regardless of whether your team's good or not, everybody bets on their team. But we didn't have that in the NBA. Really, the NBA futures market was very dry heading into the season, and even early on in the season, because, again, everyone just assumed it was going to be Cleveland versus Golden State again, and why even bother? And then as the season went on, there certainly became a run on a few teams, including Houston, but because we didn't have any of that build-up or long odds on Houston, it's not a real big liability. So the NBA futures market's actually fine for us everywhere. It's the game-by-game with so much handle lately that could get you, but so far, so good.
Heading to the Friday night action, we've got Cleveland heading to Indiana. Indiana took game one. Cleveland comes back, gets game two. Where's the betting now heading into game three? Because now we've got the Cavaliers in a situation where you don't have to worry about winning and not covering. The line is a pick 'em. Just pick the winner, or are you getting a lot of Cavaliers action?
Well, we actually have liability right now on the Pacers. And look, I have been dead wrong. After Cleveland lost game one, I was so sure that we were going to see some of those big bridge jumper style bets come in on the Cleveland Cavaliers money line on game two. I thought, man, the public is going to come in. They're going to say Cleveland can't possibly lose this game two, and we are going to see overwhelming Cleveland action, especially on the money line. And we didn't really. About 1.5 times more dollars wagered on Cleveland over the counter, and about the same on account. It wasn't that big of a gap, really, on Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, they ended up winning but not covering. And what we're seeing now is I think some people are confused, as this is one of the least bet games. As we talk about Friday and Saturday games that are all up with lines right now available for wagering, this one is one of the lesser bet games so far, which is really weird for a Cleveland Cavaliers team with LeBron James. But I think right now bettors aren't quite sure of what to make of this Cleveland Cavaliers team, and thus some of the sharper bettors are staying away. And if the game was played right this second while we're doing this podcast, we would actually need the Cleveland Cavaliers to win.
Matt, Rolf, let me go back and make this retroactive to tonight. Two big situations happened with Joel Embiid playing and Pop not playing. Can you tell us how each of those affected the closing line relative to where it was when that news was announced?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the Philly line got down to about 1 when we all assumed Embiid wasn't playing, and that wasn't like a day today. It wasn't like this morning where they announced, hey, he wasn't going to play. This was announced ahead of time overnight that Embiid wasn't going to be available, that he was doubtful to play tonight. And we saw that line almost looked like it was headed toward a pick, and we had taken some really early sharp action on the Miami Heat, who looked really good in Game 2 at Philly with no Joel Embiid. And then, of course, they announced that at late afternoon here that Embiid was going to play, and we saw a late run really heavy on Philly, driving that line all the way back up to Philly -3 at close, 3.5 at some places here in town. And that pushed our liability, which was we needed Philly all day. We were pretty heavy, sharp action on Miami, and by the time tip-off came, we needed Miami for a pretty good clip.
How about the San Antonio game with Coach Pop out?
You know what, that one, it seemed to have an initial reaction, and it's kind of been up and down, kind of going in waves, you know. We saw it get as high as 4, thought it might go to 4.5, then we checked back to 3.5. We're back to 4 -0.5 now. It's kind of been up and down, and I had an opportunity to talk to a few people, and I've seen some really different takes. I've heard some people that say, look, this Spurs team seems like they're ready to quit anyway. I mean, what a terrible season, all the drama around Kawhi Leonard. They just don't feel like they have, A, they don't match up well, B, they don't have the firepower, and without Pop there, maybe they don't have the heart and soul and, you know, the ability to even get it done. And then I've heard people say, well, regardless, anytime there's an emotional situation like this, you always play on the team that's dealing with it because they always bring a bigger effort. Personally, I just don't think San Antonio matches up well. I think Pop not being there is a disadvantage, but we've seen betting on both sides of this game now. And I mean, if the game started right now, to be honest with you, we actually need the Spurs, but it's not for a big amount of money. We've taken a lot of bets on this game, and it's pretty close, both over the counter and on account. We have liability to the Spurs, but it's certainly not a huge liability.
Matt, I want to play off that game because it kind of ties in with what I want to ask. The Spurs, a home team, down 2-0. Two more home teams down 2-0 tomorrow. Very popular betting angle saying to play on these teams, particularly in the first half. Have you seen the public start to latch onto that angle? And part of the reason I ask that, I know this is a long question, but part of the reason I ask that is, you look at 2 games tomorrow, the Wizards, they're actually favored by more in the first half than they are in the full game. And the Bucks are basically the same line in the full game as they are in the first half. So that sounds to me like you guys have adjusted for what you're expecting from some bettors who know about this angle.
Yeah, I mean, look, that angle's no secret at this point. In fact, we anticipate getting that action you just said, and we really saw it in the NHL where we offer team to score first and first period lines with the 0-2 teams going home, New Jersey getting the win, Toronto getting the win, Colorado getting the win. All those 0-2 teams except Anaheim and L.A. Going home ended up picking up the win and scoring first, and we saw action on every single one of them. So you're right, it has been there. It's in there. It's there in hockey. It's there in the NBA as well. And, I think it's interesting, as well as this Toronto Raptors team is playing, the fact that we're still seeing sharp Washington Wizards action because people just refuse to go away from that. This one's going to be a big-time pros versus Joes, though, because I can tell you the public is all over this this Toronto Raptors team is an underdog. They know they're the number 1 seed. They've been the best team in the East all year, especially since Kyrie went down. But the Wizards are getting the sharp action. This one's going to be a pros versus Joes, which is okay right now because the amount of dollars wagered is pretty close, and it's balancing the books for us.
The interesting game for me on Friday night is the Boston-Milwaukee game. Now, we know Boston is the MASH unit with the walking wounded and everybody, but they're up 2-0. They held serve at home, and I know Dave's happy about that because he's got a series play on the Celtics, and you being a Boston boy, you're probably liking that too. But moving to this one, I got to ask you, I looked at this line. We did videos yesterday at WagerTalk, and we talked about this number. It was as high as Milwaukee, 6.5 yesterday. We've seen it come back to 6 at a lot of books. This line just looks, I know you're factoring in that 0-2, but man, does this line look high. They just played here a couple weeks ago, and Milwaukee was only a 4-point favorite, a 5-point favorite, and win by 4. So it's not like in that last game they blew the Celtics out and you're having an adjustment here. This number just seems high.
Yeah, you're right, and the Sharks jumped on it right away. We actually took 2 separate 5K bets right away at 6.5, dropped to 6. The problem is, even at Bucks -6, 91% of the dollars wagered over the counter are on the Boston Celtics. The Celtics are the public team here. They're the name brand, and the public's on the Celtics heavy. The Sharps already on the Celtics pretty heavy. Don't be surprised if by tip-off 6 was a fairy tale number that we were talking about only on this show, because I think that one's headed lower and lower, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's 5 by tip-off.
Moving ahead to Saturday, let's look at the Houston-Minnesota game. You've got Houston, after sleepwalking through Game 1, Houston dominated Game 2. They actually trailed once again after the first quarter. But, man, you blinked your eye, and all of a sudden it was a 20-point game. This Rocket team, in the funny part of it is they went on that run, and they really didn't shoot that well in the game. They were hitting threes. But they
couldn't make a thing.
Yeah, and the team just, got that big lead right away. If this team comes to play for 4 quarters, does Minnesota have any chance at all?
I'll tell you, the bettors aren't betting them like they do. This is our biggest liability of all the Friday and Saturday games as of right now, the Houston Rockets here. And maybe for good reason. Open 4, up to 4.5, probably headed to 5 in this game. Look, Minnesota, they played well in first game. We know they have the talent, but if you looked at the coaching and the game plan and the offensive execution in Game 2, it was absolutely mind-boggling. Derrick Rose shooting up fadeaway twist-a-whirl jumpers with 13 seconds on the shot clock. Jang in the middle doing fadeaway 13-footers from the 7-footer with 14 seconds on the shot clock. o'clock. This team's execution, or I don't know, maybe it wasn't execution, maybe that was their game plan, and it's just the worst game plan in the history of basketball. But something's broken. Either the coaching is broken or the execution on the court is broken right now, because they are not playing off their stars for whatever reason. They're not moving the ball around to get good shots, despite the fact that, down to 0-2 going home, you're supposed to want to play on a talented Minnesota Timberwolves team getting probably 4 or 5 points here. I can't lay my money on Minnesota right now the way that they're playing basketball.
The last one we're going to talk about for Saturday is Oklahoma City at Utah. Series tied 1-1. And for you as a bookmaker, I want to ask you, how hard is it when you're setting a total on a game, when you have two teams that have absolutely contrasting styles? You've got the Thunder that want to score, and you've got Utah that wants to slow the game down to a snail's pace and play hard-nosed defense. I was actually shocked that there wasn't that much of adjustment in the total, even though you had one go over and one go way under, that you kept the total pretty close to what it was at Oklahoma City.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing, I think, to do in sports as far as setting odds, or at least it's right up there. And it's probably more prevalent in college basketball than it is the NBA, because it's hard to imagine what these kids are actually going to be able to dictate pace more than it is pros with a track record here. But you're right, very challenging, very difficult. I'll tell you, this has been an amazing series for the book so far. Everybody jumped all over the Utah Jazz series price as a small plus before the series started. They were all over the Utah Jazz game one, thinking that, here we go, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, these guys actually can't win games when it counts. Oklahoma City comes out, gets the job done in game one. And then right before game two, the reports start coming out, and the rumors start spreading that, hey, Donovan Mitchell's injury to his foot is a lot worse than people are saying. It's a lot worse than people are leading on. He's basically out there on one foot. And we saw this huge wave of Oklahoma City action prior to game two. Of course, the Jazz get the outright win in game two, which was great for us. Then people pound the Jazz on the series price at a worse number, minus 140. They could have taken plus 130. And now the sharps are all over the Jazz again. The public's back on the Jazz again. And it seems like the bettors have been wrong in this series so far, but it's because it's a small prices and low odds in every game, we're seeing a ton of action. And so far, this series has been the most profitable for the book of the NBA playoffs.
Matt, when it comes to UFC, you're one of the guys that I go to for information. There's nobody that knows the sport like you do, and obviously you get to see some of the sharpest bets that come across the counter as well. Have you seen anything on the UFC card that's getting sharp action, or anything that you like yourself that you'd like to share with our listeners? Yeah,
the main event on this week's pretty sharp. Look, I wish we were doing this last week, because I went 5-1 on the radio last week in the UFC, had a monster week. Look, we've had a monster 2-year run with the UFC. The main event here, Kevin Lee opened at minus 140, minus 135 at a lot of books. That was way too low. Kevin Lee is a really good fighter. His last fight, he lost a fight for the interim lightweight title. He was beating Tony Ferguson for much of that fight, but he was fighting with a staph infection. Anyone with a staph infection will tell you how it affects your cardio. Kevin Lee ended up fading and losing that fight to Tony Ferguson. But I think it reaffirmed all those bettors who bet Lee in that fight that this guy is the real deal. Completely healthy for this fight. No reason why he should lose to Edson Barboza, who just got manhandled by another wrestler in Khabib Nurmagomedov. So Kevin Lee, a really sharp play here. The problem is we're up from 140 to 155, but some of the other shops around town are already up to Kevin Lee minus 170. So Kevin Lee's still a sharp bet, but if you're going to bet him, you probably should play him early, and you should probably shop around for price. I mean, you don't want to lay more than 155 on a fighter that opened 140 probably. Excuse me. Co-main event of that card, Cub Swanson at Frankie Edgar. It's a rematch of a fight those two had in 2014. And there's an angle here that I like to play. Normally I don't like to play the rematches on, when one guy dominates the first fight in the UFC. Normally he dominates the second fight as well. So I don't like to play the loser of the first rematch in normal circumstances, but I've had a really good run of playing against guys coming off the first knockout loss of their career and then having a fast turnaround, less than a 90-day turnaround with another fight. That's the case here for Frankie Edgar. who filled in for when Max Holloway pulled out and fought Brian Ortega on short notice, got knocked out for the first time in his career. And this is a guy that started in the UFC in 2007, 11 years in the UFC for Frankie Edgar, former lightweight champion, former 3-time featherweight title challenger. Just coming off that knockout loss, these quick turnarounds for guys off their first knockout just don't seem to work out well. If you can get at least plus 200, might be worth taking a shot on Cub Swanson here.
Good stuff, Matt. Hey, a lot of our listeners, they're not here in Las Vegas, but they do visit a lot. Tell the listeners, most people think that you have to live in Nevada to be able to get a mobile app. That's not the case. Tell them how easy it is, and you can jump on board for just the weekend if you're in town.
Yeah, sure. Look, if you're in town for the weekend, every time you get one of those paper tickets that you're going to lose or spill your drinks on or use as a coaster, it's the same exact amount of time to go withdraw the money from the account you just opened as it is to cash a paper ticket. Take the 5 minutes, download the app, sign up for an account. We're having an amazing NFL draft party next Thursday at the Palm, sponsored by New Era. We have 4 different hosts hosting it. They're going to give away hats and jerseys from all 32 teams. We're going to be releasing NFL season win totals, yes, no to make the playoffs, NFL division odds, season-long player props, quarterback to throw the most touchdowns, most passing yards, all that great stuff. And you could sit there from the bar, from your house, from your couch, from your hotel room, wherever you're at, and bet on all that stuff from the convenience of your from your mobile phone. Bet the games where you watch the games from the convenience of your mobile phone. That's how people bet in 2018.
Great stuff, as always, Matt. We appreciate you coming on the show. You're a great friend of the show. Look forward to talking to you soon. And you can follow Matt on Twitter. It's Matthew Holt, VP. Check him out on Twitter. It's time for a short break. When we return, we're going to move into the weekend of NBA playoff games. Ralph, Dave, and myself are going to break down the games. We'll be right back here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Let's jump into this weekend's NBA games, and we'll start it off Friday night. We talked about it briefly with Matt Holt. We've got Cleveland Cavaliers at the Indiana Pacers, and if we're talking Cleveland basketball, you know where I'm going first. We're going to start with Ralph. And Ralph, Cleveland was able to salvage a split at home as after looking very bad in Game 1, they stormed out to a 33-18 first-quarter lead, but then had to hang on 100-97 for the win in no cover as LeBron took matters into his own hands in Game 2, scoring 46 points in 39 minutes on the floor. Can he keep that up and carry this team?
You know, he can keep it up. He needs a little help, and Kevin Love went out 5 of 16. You look at what the starters did. Besides LeBron, the 4 other starters shot 13 of 32. That's not going to get it done. Korver or K-Love has to be able to hit a few three-pointers. Changed up the starter lineup, brought in J.R. Smith, tweaked some things, but you know, Victor Oladipo is the key to the Pacers. They went 0-7 without him. He got 2 quick fouls, only played 28 minutes in the last game, still scored 21 points. But if he is on the court for 35 to 38 minutes, Pacers win this game. If Kevin Love comes back or Korver combined, if they're going to hit 40% from three-point land, I think the Cavs win it.
Look, I'll just add one thing here, and this is just a psychological observation, if you will. Long time ago, Mike Tyson was, nobody wanted to even get near him. Michael Spinks admitted being afraid of him. There was that tremendous fear factor, and then Buster Douglas knocked him out. And the fear factor wasn't there anymore, and he was never the same fighter. The Cavaliers, coming into this season, still had that fear factor among Eastern Conference teams. They don't anymore. They just don't anymore. And they, whether it's not playing any defense during the course of the regular season, taking it easy during the course of the regular season, not having the right mix, doesn't matter. The fact is, and I am absolutely positive of this, doesn't mean Cleveland can't win, but the wins are going to be a lot tougher for this team. even in the Eastern Conference, because nobody's scared of them anymore. And Indiana clearly isn't scared of them anymore. They've got a real chance to win this series.
You know, we talked about this off air, I think, last show. I mean, when you have Tristan Thompson, who was probably one of the most valuable players in the Cavs playoff runs the last 2 years, doesn't even make the 10-man rotation in the playoffs, that's when the Cavs played defense, rebounded, and were scrappy. They changed their method. They had to compete with Houston and Golden State, and they changed the way their team plays to be able to compete with them.
Yeah, and you talked about, having Love and Korver scoring the points. After those two, and they had 15 and 12 in the last game, the rest of the team, the next leading scorer was 6 points. They're not getting anything, and no balance at all. And I just don't think you can win at this level like that. And I said it before last week's show with the Indiana Pacers. You throw out the last game of the season, which meant nothing for the Pacers. This is a team that's on an 8-3 straight-up run, 9-2 against the spread. And here's the amazing part. 8 of those 11 games were played on the road. This is a team playing good basketball at the right time. I think they're going to be confident coming back home for Game 3.
And again, I'm not writing off the Cavs, but let me ask you this, Ralph, because you're the Cleveland guy here. Is it fair to say that this team has had a lame duck mentality this year with the knowledge that, look, he's done. He's gone after this. LeBron's not going to be with Cleveland next year, and everybody knows it. And it's kind of like, that this is just not a good situation. We see it with football coaches and stuff like that, where you've got the guy, and he's not going to be around in the team. And you can even see it in baseball this year already with the Cincinnati Reds, who everybody knew Brian Price was going to be the first manager fired. They played awful baseball. I think that lame duck mentality has been with Cleveland all season, and that's part of their problem. What do you think?
I agree with you until the second set of trades. When they got the young Larry Nance, when they got the young Rodney Hood, when they got those players coming in that didn't have playoff experience, when LeBron became the teacher and the mentor again, I think he then played that Cavaliers strength and mentality. So because of that reason, because he likes to be the mentor, he was the father, basically. He was called Tristan Thompson's father, the way he brought him up, the way he taught him how to play basketball, the way he taught him how to act around the court. You may not know that for the Chloe fans now, but back in the days when they were young. But LeBron changed a little bit when he got those young players and became the mentor again the second half of the year. LeBron, like you said, they may not have the fear factor, but we saw Game 1. He didn't take a shot the first 5 or 6 minutes. He let the other kids try to do it. Last game, he took over from the tip-off, and I expect him to do that again this game.
One last stat I'll throw in there for you. If you want to back the Indiana Pacers, here's a stat. In home games, when revenging a same-season loss, and that's where they're at, they're coming back home playing with revenge, how about 20-9 against the spread over the last 2 seasons? So that bodes well for Indiana backers. Moving on to the game we talked about also, Boston at Milwaukee. Dave, you're sitting there with that 2-0 lead in this series. Have you seen anything in the first 2 games that causes you pause or makes you feel more confident about your series play of what you've seen so far?
No, about the same. I think the Bucks will do no worse than split these games. I think this could be a fairly lengthy series. To me, if I can get Boston at home in Game 7, I'm not going to be dissatisfied with that. Although up 2-0, obviously, I'd like it to be a little bit easier than that. But no, I expect the Bucks to put forth a much bigger and more confident effort, shall we say in Game 3. You're going to have to pay the premium. But if you wait until game time, if you like the Bucks, my advice would be wait until game time. You'll get your best number, as Matthew Holt explained, probably right before post time. I don't know that it'll get to 4.5, but I think 5 will certainly be available. And if you're going to play the first half, same thing. There's no rush to the window. By the way, that's another reason that even if you live here, if you don't have the betting apps, you're out of your mind. I mean, what are you going to do? Drive there and sit in the book and then get in line and hope you don't get shut out?
Yeah, because everybody's when that board changes, everybody's running to make that same bet.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
and you're paying to park.
You're right, and probably
on the strip you are
probably having a walk a long distance, which for a lazy old bastard like me is not a good thing.
As he's looking at 2 fat lazy old bastards.
Yeah, well, all right, but, the fact is, I'm going to be plunked in an easy chair, and I'll have the absolute. Okay, there's the best line. I'll take that. It is the way we bet in 2018. It's a whole lot easier.
Ralph, how do you see this one with Boston and Milwaukee?
We did a video on this, Marco, and really it just resounds. Milwaukee has to feel like they let the opportunity slide away. Game 1, they outshot Boston 48.2 to 41.5. Game 2, they outshot Boston 59.7. Who shoots 60% on the road and loses and doesn't cover? The Milwaukee Bucks did. Boston shot only 53.3. Technically, this is a Boston game. Milwaukee comes in 1-10, their last 11 as a home favorite. Boston comes in 16-5-1. ATS is a dog. To me, these points are a gift. Grab them with Boston.
Yeah, I'll make it unanimous here. You look at this one, and the Milwaukee defense, they've allowed 110 points or more in 10 of their last 17 games. In the 17 games in total, 16 of the 17 opponents scored over 100 points against them. The only team that didn't top 100 was Orlando, who was just playing pitiful this year. And do you really want to be laying an inflated number? Because as we talked with Matt, this line is inflated. They're living off that 0-2 at home, and they pump this number up. I don't want to be laying extra points with a team that doesn't play good defense. For me, it's all about value. I'm on Boston, and I'll give you guys a key stat here. Now, granted, you got to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt because Boston's banged up, and this stat was whenever they were at full strength. But
they've never been at full strength.
Well,
they really haven't. They've played 0 games this season with their projected starting lineup. 0.
I was at the opener in Cleveland watching that Boston injury, and it was horrific as it got. Yeah.
You were at the end of the arena where it happened. It happened in front of you.
Yeah.
It was sickening on TV. I can't imagine being in the arena and seeing that injury. But over the last 2 seasons against the Central Division, Boston's 18-4 against the spread. So just another thing to back, Boston.
I'm not playing it because there's no point in my
You've got
playing
the
it because I
series
got the Celtics in the series. But we've seen it in the first 2 games. Stevens, and I'm not knocking Prouty. I think he's done a nice job as an interim coach for Milwaukee. But we don't even know if he's going to be the full-time coach. And Stevens is as good as it gets at in-game adjustments, even to the point where they kind of let one get away. In the game that went to overtime, the Bucks played well down the stretch in that game, but there's nothing you can do sometimes. The other team's making great shots.
Thankfully, they let that away because I had Boston in that game and covered it overtime.
Yeah.
So that's one of those wins that you tend to forget that you got. But
How good has it been for me lately? I had a 5% play in that game.
Yeah.
And
I can remember about 6 months ago you were whining, complaining about all the extra inning and overtime games that you were losing.
I had, and it's no lie, last year, during the baseball season, this was a stretch of about, 8 or 9 weeks. I was involved in 26 extra inning games, and I lost 22 of them. Okay, so I got some evening up to do still.
The gambling gods still have a credit with you. You got some games coming?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
All right, let's move to Saturday. We talked about this one already, but we'll be brief. Do you guys can you make a case for Minnesota in this game at all against the Rockets? This Rockets team, when they want to play, they're good.
Well, I think Minnesota comes out real hard early in the game. And whether they can make it stand up for 48 minutes, I don't know. But I would say for 12, that's what I would be looking at here. 12. Give me 12 minutes, Minnesota. 1 quarter. And I think I might take the T-Wolves in the first quarter of this game because I think that's where you're going to get, Houston might be a little bit relaxed here. Now, over the course of 48 minutes, the superior team probably gets their feet together and their heads together and it takes over. But early in the game, I think the Timberwolves might have a little advantage. The crowd's going to be going nuts and they'll be fired up. And I think they'll be competitive for a while in this game.
I think that Houston paid attention to the other series. They know that the series is 1-1. They feel a little happy with that situation, not having to play OKC or Utah right away. But still, this is Houston. Houston had 31 road wins, the only team in the NBA to have 30 wins. And you look at Houston, they shot 47% and 36.5% in their 2 home games. Yeah. This team averages almost 50% at home. They're going to go on the road. Minnesota does not have the offense. Minnesota allows 119 points per game as a home dog, and I don't think they can last in this game.
You talk about the totals and that. In these first two games, both games went under the total, which were very good results for the books because the average bettor, when they see a team with a big spread, they automatically want to gravitate to the over as well because they expect a lot of points. And Houston hasn't done it. And I look at it, and like you said, Ralph, Houston has shot as bad as they have shot and still posted a 20-point win. If they shoot anywhere near their season numbers and play a solid 4 quarters, I think it is going to be Houston in the over. And I hate to be square, but sometimes square gets there.
I'm going to bet you Harden has a better game than he did the last game.
Oh, that's a safe bet, buddy. All right, guys, hey, I'll throw one stat out at you for Houston. Listen to this. The last 2 seasons, when they head out on the road off a home win, the Houston Rockets 20-5 against the spread, and that's the situation they find themselves in on Saturday. Last one, and I think this is going to be a great game. I can't wait to watch this one. I like that contrasting styles with these two teams. You got Oklahoma City and Utah. Dave, this Utah team, they've been one of the biggest surprises. Nobody expected them to be this good, especially after their best player, Gordon Hayward, signed with the Celtics in the offseason. And to show you how much this Utah team has improved just from the start of the season to where we are now, when they played Oklahoma City the first time this year, that was back in October, they were a 4-point home underdog to Oklahoma City. When they played the second time in late December, Utah was a 1.5-point favorite. Now we're looking at them in a playoff game. They're a 4-point favorite. The market is definitely catching up to the Utah Jazz. The question is, has it caught up enough? What do you make of this game and this number?
I don't know.
Well, that's honest.
No, that's an honest answer. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going on in this series, and that's the beauty of sports betting is you're not compelled to bet on every game. I think it's a fun series to watch, but you've got this contrast in styles among these teams, and it's whoever is able to impose their will the best. I think you mentioned it earlier, Ralph. If the Thunder are able to play run and shoot type of basketball, they're probably going to win. And Marco, you said this, so you used the term snail's pace, and that's right. And if Utah is able to muck it up, they're going to win. So, to me, this is a game where you look at the in-game betting. If you want to get involved, try and make an assessment early on as to who seems to be imposing their will more successfully, and that's probably the right side, and that's probably where you can get a bet in. It might also be one of those games where you might see swings during the course of the game where it enables you to take plus the points with one team, live betting, and then plus the points with another team in live betting during the game. That's the only way I'd look at this. Before the game, no clue.
Ralph, you look at this Utah team. We've talked so many times about that defense of theirs. They've held 22 of their last 23 opponents to under 50% shooting from the field. 10 of those 22 to 40% or less. I mean, you think about those numbers. They got a Oklahoma City team that at times is very undisciplined. It's a team made up of all people that are offensive presence. Can Utah dictate the pace in this game? And looking at that 4-point number, it's easier to look at Utah if this thing was in that 2.5 range because you're basically saying just pick the winner. But at 4, you're getting it to that 2-possession type game. And when you're thinking about a game that's going to be maybe in the 90s, those points come in. Every point counts.
Utah has one of the biggest home road dichotomies as far as points allowed is concerned. At home, they allow 96.7 points. On the road, they allow 103.1. And, you also have to factor in the altitude. Now, everyone's played the Denver-Utah back-to-back games. Everyone knows what it is to play at Utah. But when you're playing a third playoff game in a physical atmosphere, and now you're on the road with the altitude, I think that's going to play in at least in the second half. I agree with Dave. I think you're going to get swings in this game. This series is certainly lined up to be one of those zigzag series. Utah made the adjustments, stopped the offense in the game 2. Can OKC make those adjustments on offense? Game 3, that's what we'll have to see.
And talking about a stat here, Oklahoma City, when they are playing with revenge this season, in-season revenge, so obviously they lost game 2. They are just 5-18 against the spread this year, playing with revenge. And a couple stats for the totals players. Oklahoma City off a home loss this season in their next game. They are 11-3 to the under. In Utah, when playing at home and had an extra day's rest or playing with 2 days rest or more, 8-1 to the under this year.
You got to remember, though, that OKC stat you gave, OKC burned a lot of money on a lot of stats. I mean, they were just one of the worst ATS teams, so you have to add that into that number.
All right, guys, good stuff. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to break down 3 of the bigger baseball games for this weekend. We'll be right back here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're at the 3/4 pole, and we are going to look at some baseball for this weekend. Let's get it started. Friday night, we've got Cleveland at Baltimore. It's going to be Trevor Bauer pitching against Dylan Bundy. It's Cleveland, so we're going to go ahead and start with Ralph on this one. Ralph, the Indians, they had Thursday off, and boy, did they need it after that series in Puerto Rico. They played the Minnesota Twins. They basically played a doubleheader almost on Wednesday night whenever they went 16 innings in that pitcher's duel. How does that affect them? It's good they had the day off, and it's early in the season, but do you see any problems with this team starting this series?
You know, I really don't perceive it as a day off. If you watch that game, it was grueling. It was 18 innings. It was draining. It was using everyone on the roster. It was using, a starter to finish the game. So, as far as now traveling back from San Juan and everything they did, to me it doesn't count as a day off. I look at Baltimore as Dylan Bundy. If I told you that there's a pitcher with 4 starts this year, he's got a 1.40 ERA, he's got a 1.09 WHIP, and he's got a 31-7 strikeout walk ratio, and he's 0-2. You would say that's like, Dave, that's like your overtime games last year, your extra inning games. You just got screwed.
Well,
yes.
Well,
I mean,
guess what? He's on a terrible team.
Yeah, well, you lost 2-1 to Toronto, and then he left the game 1-1 after 5 innings against Boston and lost 7-1. But Bauer lost a game 1-0 to Kansas City this year too. But in this situation, Cleveland's hitting. We saw their bunting troubles. A lot was made of that on ESPN. I don't take that into fruition, but they're still last in batting average. So going into this game, I actually will fade Cleveland. I do like Baltimore with Bundy in a lower scoring game.
I will probably stay out of it. I really don't like the Indians coming out of the travel to Puerto Rico. But boy, the Orioles, you're going back to the end of last season. They're 9-33 in their last 42 games. So they were awful at the end of last season. They've been awful at the beginning of this season. And, Bundy's not getting any run support, which means that he's going to work against him eventually, because what'll happen is that Bundy's going to have to feel he's got to be perfect every time he goes out there, and that's not a good thing for a pitcher. It's not an ideal situation for Cleveland, but Baltimore is basically unbettable at this point. I don't know. I know we talked about this before with the Cavaliers, lame duck stuff. Get a lot of lame ducks in Baltimore. Machado's not going to be there next year. Buck Showalter is probably not going to be there after this year. He's probably going to retire. It's just not a good situation for the Orioles. Their offensive numbers, Woba, stuff like that, I mean, just awful. Awful. The bullpen's not any good. It's a bad baseball team. If you're going to bet the Orioles here, first 5 it, guys, okay? Because you're banking on Bundy, and if you're banking on, that's cool. If you're going to bank on Bundy, but he's not going to be there past, 7? He's not going to throw 9. So, to me, you look at first 5 and try and go that way if you want that side.
That's exactly where I'm going, Dave. I'm going first 5 with Baltimore. And Dylan Bundy, he is, he was highly regarded as their top pitching, prospect coming up.
Best prospect in baseball before he hurt his elbow.
Yeah, and, he's shown signs off and on, of what he can be. And so far this year, this is the Bundy that we were waiting to see. We just got to get those bats. But I know he's been a hard luck pitcher so far this year, but given the way he's pitching and given the situation that Cleveland finds themselves in, you got to bet Bundy here or you pass the game. And I agree with you. I want no parts of that Baltimore bullpen.
Well, quickly on the bullpen, the problem is no Britton.
Right.
Givens is just, I don't know what his problem is, but he's not commanding his stuff like he did last year. So you're basically down to Brock and O'Day and not a lot else. That's not a good bullpen.
Absolutely not. Now, moving to Saturday, guys, when I sent this one out originally to you guys, we were supposed to have Kershaw on Saturday, but Kershaw's not going Saturday. It's Rayu going. Kershaw got moved up to Friday night. But this is still a good pitching matchup. We've got Washington with Strasburg on the mound. And, guys, a lot of people are figuring this is the preview to the National League Championship Series. These two teams haven't played that way yet, but, Dave, we looked at the Dodgers. We were worried about those bats. Not worried about those bats anymore. How about 51 runs in the last 7 games? In one of those 7 games, they only had 1 run.
Yep.
So they scored 50 runs in 6 games.
Yeah, they're starting to hit, but they still got worries because Jansen, there's something going on out there, and that's their closer, and that really dominoes the whole bullpen. The good news for Washington here is that their bullpen will finally be fresh. Dave Martinez really screwed things up again. I'm glad he did, because on Wednesday night I had a 5% play on the Mets. And if you read for those who happen to purchase the play and read my analysis, this doesn't get any better than this in terms of nailing one. I pointed out that, they're big 3 leverage guys, Madsen, Doolittle, and I'm leaving out the third guy. I'm blanking on him. But they had all worked 3 games in 4 days. So he's probably not going to be able to use any of those guys. But lo and behold, it's 4-2. Nationals, bottom of the 8th. He brings in Madsen. The guy's 37 years old. He's got injury history, and he brings him in for a 3rd straight game in 4th out of 5. 9 runs later. Thank you very much. That was bad managing by Dave Martinez. You got to go with somebody else in that situation. Now, the bullpen's gotten a few days off now because they had an off day, and that will help them. But this is still a team that's a little bit banged up right now. I don't really trust Ryu a great deal. I think there's a big edge with Strasburg here, but it's going to end up in the line. I'm going to end up with no play in this game.
For you guys that don't know, if you go to WagerTalk.com and you go to the handicappers and you go to Dave's page, you can read Dave's last 20 games. It's an incredible piece to the website that a lot of people don't know about. You go to that, even if you didn't bet his 5% play, the next morning, you can go to Dave's page and his last 20 games are archived. Click on that 5% play and read why he gave out the Mets, and you'll read what a good write-up it was and what a good analysis it was for the game.
Good stuff, Ralph. And you look at Rayo, he's pitched very well in his last 2 games. But, guys, it was against San Diego and Oakland. Now he's going to be facing a real major league lineup.
What are you picking on the Padres for? Come on, man. I love that ballpark.
It's a great ballpark, yes. And I know you're in love with one of their pitchers. You got a little man crush on Lucchesi. Go there. Yeah.
Guy's putting money in a lot of people's pockets right now, including mine.
Yeah, and mine too. I agree with you. But he's making a little bit of a step up in class this week facing this Washington lineup. I'm going to go – I lean to Washington in this one for me. Ralph, you want to close it out?
Yeah, I'm on Washington as well. You look at what Strasburg's done this year. 3-1 with a 1.33 ERA, a .67 whip, 38-4 strikeout walk. And when you look at a lot of pitchers and when you look at their home and road breakouts, over the last 3 years, Strasburg 19-14 at home with a 3.2. Nobody's pitched better on the road. 31-11 with a 2.4 ERA the last 3 years for Strasburg.
By the way, chance for Bryce Harper to play in front of what many people think will be his next destination. We'll have to wait and see on that, but
I think there's going to be a lot of people in the running.
They're going to be carrying big trunks full of cash.
Would you like to be his agent right now?
I'd like to be his butler right now. Are you kidding?
Moving to the last game on Sunday, we've got Toronto at the Yankees. And, Ralph, you got Jaime Garcia going for Toronto. And this is one of those ones where I like to call it, you get a chance to bite the hand that fed you. He wasn't there long, but he did make 8 starts for the Yankees last year. Do you think that gets him a little pumped up going back to Yankee Stadium?
Well, he's a answer to a trivia question. He made 3 straight starts for 3 different teams last year. That's the only time since 1895 that's been done.
I remember that.
Because, he pitched for Atlanta, Minnesota, and the Yankees. And the last time anyone pitched for 3 different teams was 2007. But, with Jaime Garcia, he's lasted into the 5th and the 6th inning the last couple games. The way Cervino's pitching right now, he's really just done the progression into his 3rd year. He's still very young, but to go 14-16 last year with a 2.98, he's proven he really is a number 1 starter. I couldn't play against him.
No, Severino's he's tremendous, and Garcia, he's getting by on his smarts. Okay, he doesn't throw the ball as well as he used to. This guy's had a ton of injuries. He could have been a really terrific pitcher because he's got 4 quality pitches, but he just doesn't throw them quite the way he used to. Smart enough to hang in, but he's up against an ace here. It's going to be priced this way. I mean, it's going to be a big number on the Yankees here, and rightfully so. They'll price me out of this game because if I really like a side that's more than $1.50, then I'll try and create a -1, and it'll be a deal where I'm playing half on the money line, half on the runs line. But to do that, I want to get plus money on the runs line, and I don't think it's going to be available here. So I'll just be pretty much on the sidelines on this one.
Yeah, and Garcia had 3 starts at Yankee Stadium last year. Had, what was that ERA?
2.20.
2.20. I think he's going to be jacked up for the start. If I can get a total, I'm hoping to see an 8 on this. I don't know if we can get the 8. If I get an 8, I'm definitely looking at the under.
There you go.
And that's going to wrap up this segment, guys. We're going to come right back, short break, and when we come back, it's 3 best bets, 1 each from us, and we'll wrap up the show. Back in a few. All right, welcome back, guys. It's the home stretch. It's best bet time. As I said at the beginning of the show, 4 wins, 1 loss, and 1 pending. We've got that Boston Celtic future bet for the series, and they're up 2-0, so we could be looking at this time at 5-1 in a few games. But, guys, let's get it started. I'll go to you first, Ralph, for your best bet for the weekend. Where are you heading?
First off, I want to mention that I bring out the best in people because my best bet was the one that lost going against Bartolo Colon when he almost threw a perfect game. So just to let you know that I really do bring out the best in people. But I'm going to the Houston Rockets against Minnesota. I'm going to lay the 4.5. I think it's a sweep. Minnesota may have a little emotion the first quarter of the first half. But for Houston to shoot 47% and 36.5% their first 2 games, that's not going to happen. Rockets sweep and win and cover this game.
I'm heading to the NHL. In Game 1 between the Sharks and the Golden Knights. And I kind of like the Golden Knights in the game, but we'll have to pay a price there. What I'm going to recommend, you got 2 real hot goalies here. I mean, Martin Jones is playing really well for San Jose. Fleury, he had a .977 save percentage in the series against the Kings. And we know the style the Knights are playing, which is a really, really tight fundamental style. They're clogging. Their neutral zone positioning is absolutely sensational. There's only 10 goals that got scored in the entire series between the Kings and the Golden Knights. You think they're going to change their style here against the Sharks? I don't. Under, and they're going to make you pay for it. It's probably going to be a 5. That's all right with me. If there's more than 4 goals scored in this game, there might not be more than 2 goals scored in the game. I like the under between San Jose and Vegas.
Dave, we know the Kings were number 1 in the NHL in goals in goals allowed, the best defensive team. Does the Knights playing the Kings in the first series help them play Stanley Cup hockey moving forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And it's not like the Knights didn't take chances offensively, but the one thing they paid attention to in all 4 games was we are not going to get out of position defensively. I don't see why that's going to change. This is the best coached team, and it is the best coached team in the league this year. He's going to be the coach of the year. If anybody who doesn't vote for Gallant as coach of the year is insane. Literally, They should be committed to some kind of an institution. Hey, look, it could be a 3-3 game. It goes to overtime and you get beat, but based on the way both teams played in the first series, I think this is going to be. I think the Sharks are going to play a similar style to the Kings, which is be as physical as you can get. They're not going to outskate Vegas. They can't stay with them for speed. So to me, you've got to play this style of hockey, and that to me should indicate more unders.
And they got a couple days to rest. That having that 4-0 sweep, we talked about that. This was not a style that Vegas was used to playing, and that they could be banged up coming out of this series. Doing it in 4 and then getting the rest, definitely a help for them. For my best bet, well, you know what? You couldn't get it done last week against Bartolo Colon. I'm going to go to the mound and see if we can knock this guy off that fountain of youth that he found somewhere. I don't know where it was, if it was actually in a fountain or somewhere else in a little
soda fountain, probably.
Yeah. Or in something injectable.
It was probably at some media party that I didn't get invited to.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I had more fun tweeting in that game. I mean, I'm saying, this is for those of you you health freaks, at least the next time you get a salad, put a shitload of blue cheese on it, okay? And something else, Bartolo Colon is an inspiration to those of us who don't give a rat's ass.
I'm looking at this one, and we've got James Paxton going for Seattle. And after a tough first start, he's been absolute money. In his last 3 starts, he has an ERA of 2.65, a whip of 1.06, a strikeout to walk ratio of 24-5. And I'm going to be going against Cologne here. We use a phrase in horse racing whenever a horse has a great outing and really extends himself, that he bounces in the next start or the next race. Well, I'm looking for Cologne to bounce in this one. His 2 previous starts, he was knocked out early. Yeah, well, if he fell, he would bounce. Come on, guys. But you look at him, the 2 previous starts, he had 29 pitches in both of the previous 2 starts because he got taken out early. He didn't make it out of the 3rd inning. Now they stretched him out. He had that no-hitter going into the 8th. He threw 96 pitches. I just don't think he's going to have the same stuff in this outing. I'm going against him. I'll take Seattle for my best bet. And that's going to wrap it up for this week, guys. Want to thank everybody for tuning in, and be sure to check out at WagerTalk. We got a special going this week. 7 days, normally $99. Pick your favorite capper. I know 3 of them are sitting here in the room you won't go wrong with, and you can get $69, $30 off, just $69 for a 7-day package. I want to thank Dave and Ralph for joining me in studio today. And, of course, you wouldn't be able to hear any of this without our man behind the controls, Mark Seidel. And a big shout-out to our guy that gets us everywhere on social media, Johnny Detroit. Till next week, this is Marco D'Angelo. Guys, let's cash some tickets.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.